Good evening, and welcome to AUA's Advancing Your Career Strategies and Best Practices for APPs Working in Urology panelist discussion. This discussion is brought to you by the AUA APP Membership Engagement Subcommittee. I am Leslie Lorbacher, the APP Member Engagement Team Lead, as well as your moderator this evening. I am a nurse practitioner of 9 years, and I work at the University of North Carolina. With more than 1,800 members, APPs are the fastest growing membership segment of the AUA. The APP committee reports into the Education Council and includes 3 subcommittees: member engagement, live education, and online education. The member engagement subcommittee reports into the section secretary's membership council and is charged with helping the AUA to engage and recruit new members and help ensure that the AUA provides benefits that are meeting the needs of advanced practice providers in urology. A couple of notes before we begin our fantastic discussion tonight. Our APP of the Year nominations will open on November 21st, 2023, so please keep an eye out for that announcement. You can renew your membership by going to auanet.org/myAUA. And if you are new here, welcome. You can find all of our membership information at join.auanet.org/memberships. We hope that you all enjoy the discussion tonight and take away something that can help you in your career. Please feel free to submit your questions via chat during the discussions. We will answer questions at the end. Let's get this started.
My name is Karini Hughes. I will be speaking from the earlier career aspect of things. I am a urology nurse practitioner and I'm practicing in Rochester, Minnesota. So let's go ahead and get started. And before I dive into everything, I do want to say thank you for AUA for providing me this platform of speaking on my earlier career development so far. Before I pursued my urology APP fellowship to dive more into urology back in 2020, there was a video similar to this that was created a few years ago that helped me learn more about urology, and it's something I reflect on. And I'm very thankful to be a part of this process today because I know how it helped me. Okay, so this is kind of like my roadmap. So let's go along for the journey just to get to know me a little bit. So you can probably hear from my accent, but I am from Kentucky. And I went to the University of Kentucky to pursue my bachelor's degree in nursing. During that, I was a research intern and I also was a sexual health educator. Very passionate about sexual health. After graduation, I was an ICU nurse for about almost 6 years. Throughout that process, I also had a passion for education. So I was a clinical instructor, and then sticking to the trend of me always wanting to do a little bit more, I also pursued my doctorate degree in nursing. So I worked full time and then pursued that full time and eventually graduated in 2020. So again, working in the ICU, and at that time, in 2020, where there was COVID. So a lot of different things were going on, but through shadowing experiences in urology, I grasped onto urology and I knew it's something that would fulfill me and something I'd be passionate about. However, I'm a type A/B person, and I knew I wanted to dive into every subspecialty in urology. Obviously, I know I can't know everything, but that's what led me towards the APP Urology Fellowship that I completed for a year. Luckily, I was granted this opportunity through Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, and then moving forward after that 12 months of diving into every different subspecialty in urology and even some procedural training. I've also dived into a few different organizations, AUA being one of those. And then after about 12 months, I was granted the opportunity to work at within the urology department at Mayo Clinic, which has been an amazing opportunity that I'm very thankful for. And through that, I'm always still looking for opportunities, whether it's within my department or organizations I'm a part of. But I will say, yes, I am early in my career. So the car is still going and I'm still learning throughout that process. So why I chose urology? So a few different reasons. Obviously, with just being in healthcare, it's an impactful field, as with various specialties are. But not only that, but the variety of cases. Every time I go into work when I'm in an outpatient clinic, there's never a case that is similar to the other. So it's very diverse. It's an engaging practice. Again, speaking from something that I'm very passionate about, I am very engaged within it because it's something that I love to talk about. Um, it's a collaborative approach. This is something I love. I've always had a passion for women's health, and that grew to more of like a sexual health aspect for men and women. But I enjoy the collaborative approach with working with nephrologists, surgeons, oncologists within every aspect of urology. So that's something I appreciate. It's a very dynamic field. Um, the procedural aspect, the medical aspect, and with all of that, a lot of personal fulfillment. I will say that I had about a 12-month aspect. I had a 12-month period during my fellowship to see if urology really was a fit for me. So again, graduated my DMP and then pursued the fellowship. And throughout that experience, I was fulfilled, and I knew that this would be a specialty that I would be happy with. So that's why I chose urology. The picture on the right shows, it's a picture from last year's graduation for one of the other APP urology fellows. Okay, so what do I like most about the position that I am in right now? One highlight would be APP support. I feel like whenever you are looking for a department to work with, or you're looking at a position, knowing that there is APP support, so those that whether it's from leadership or having APPs around you has been wonderful. For about whenever I first started, about 12 plus APPs that were sitting just right beside me in clinic, and always found that to be great opportunity for mentorship and just developing as an APP. I like the position of working in the outpatient clinic. I worked inpatient for about 6 years and knew that I wanted to do something a little bit different with a different schedule moving forward. I really appreciated the procedural opportunity. I was taught cystos, stent removals, and some other procedures during my fellowship. And to do that now moving forward has really brought me a lot of fulfillment. And I really appreciate the collaborative approach. I could probably name some key players that I always call, whether it's from radiology, interventional radiology, or nephrology, where we all work together to reflect the best we can for patient management. And the development opportunity within my department, I felt like there was a lot of the leadership there was very open towards opportunities and reflecting and utilizing APPs to the max, which is something I really appreciated, and it has definitely shown. So my involvement so far in urology, during my APP fellowship, again, after my doctorate degree, I was kind of a little sold on studying, but then I pursued the fellowship, and that was even more reading. So I wanted to do something fun. So one thing I can reflect on that has helped me within the networking aspects, but also made reading guidelines still and diving into urology fun, was I created a social media platform on Instagram called Uro Nurse Practitioner, where I highlight things within urology, whether it's resources or guidelines that I just reviewed, and it just made it a fun opportunity to spread awareness and education. As a previous clinical instructor, it's something that I just really have a passion for. Also, departmental opportunities, whether it's working on initiatives, improving procedures, or improving how we order things. Those are opportunities within the department that I like to dive into. Being a part of the AUA committee, again, I'm a part of AUA, and obviously diving into the committee aspect is another growth opportunity that I dived into. And since the fellowship that I completed in 2020, I have always pursued different opportunities to speak on things I'm passionate about, whether it's at a local level, regionally, or a national conference. So I've always sought out those opportunities or asked those, could I present, and I think that's one great opportunity to network, meet others within the field, whether it's your state or out of state. So hurdles. So the hurdles I'm speaking from come from the APPs I work with and also my own. And one hurdle to highlight, which would be number one overall, would be imposter syndrome. I feel like early in your career, within the various subspecialties in urology, it's so easy to feel like you don't know it all and feel like an imposter within what you're the role that you're in. And it's important to know that it's just one step in front of the other and just learning aspect. And within that, it's great to have APP mentors. Not every department will have the mentorship opportunity that I have currently, and I understand that. But I feel like that's one hurdle is finding an APP mentor, especially within your specialty. And I would definitely cling on to that. And if you have a mentor there, be thankful for them. And then another hurdle is just having the confidence within various subspecialties, whether you're working in reconstructive urology to oncology. But even if you don't know it all, always be open to ask someone that does, and just know your resources, know the guidelines and everything, and all the information that's available to you. The top picture is me in Hawaii presenting at a conference, and below is me after my fellowship banquet in 2021. So, seizing opportunities for growth. Number one, focusing on yourself. I always say there's 3 cups to fill: spiritual, mental, and physical. And once you have those 3 cups filled, then you can pour yourself into some other things or pour into others. So, always focus on that. Number one, identifying your interests at the at the end of my fellowship. And moving forward, I thought I had this one track mind of what I wanted to do, as continue to develop as those around me have enlightened me on different opportunities. Embracing opportunities. Again, I cannot emphasize this more, from a local, national, or an educational opportunity. And then being a part of a professional organization. But ultimately, sorry for the barking in the background, I do have a dog. But ultimately, I would like to say that there are various opportunities each way that you look, but it's kind of more up to you on what you want to decide to pursue. But just don't be scared to ask or to pursue that. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Jennifer Lewis. I am the mid-career APP. I'm a nurse practitioner, family nurse practitioner by trade and education. And I'm currently a clinical assistant professor here at the great state of Oklahoma at the University of Oklahoma Health Science Center. So a little bit about my background. I did everything the long way. So I actually started out with my associate's degree because I knew I wanted to be a nurse when I grew up. And I started out in the pediatric intensive care. I did that for a couple of years, and then I ended up working at the University of Oklahoma in our residency program, where we have uninsured and underinsured patients. And I had the opportunity to work with 21 different specialties. So I really got a view of what all of those specialties had to offer, from cardiology, general surgery, trauma, plastic surgery, you name it. I got exposed to it. And urology, it just really felt like we clicked. While I was getting my master's, I really kind of dived into what does urology entail? What is the opportunity? And then ultimately, I started working after my master's as a nurse practitioner in urology, and then got my terminal degree in 2015. So early on in my career, I really didn't know what I was doing. So I leaned very heavily. Thankfully, at an academic center, I had the opportunity with the residents and fellows around me. And also I had really forgiving attendings who were always willing to teach me. After the department kind of grew and took off, we had a new chairman, then there were more APPs that could be kind of my resource. But what I did find was early on in my career, one of the nurses that I worked with was heavily involved with an organization called SUNA, and all of the residents and obviously the attendings were really big into AUA, and that's kind of how I got involved there. So during my doctorate program,
one of my emphasis was transitional care and urology from pediatric to adults. And so I've done lots of presentations and publications, and I do research projects with all of the residents. So I just really try to throw myself out there. So when talking, why did I choose urology? Urology really chose me. I'm not a very serious person. I don't take myself too serious, and I try not to take life too serious. I feel like I relate better with the patients in urology just because I feel like I can really get them to feel comfortable because it's such an intimate area to talk about. And so you're in luck. I chose it as well. And so it was like a match made in heaven. I've been at the Department of Urology for 12 years and teaching alongside that whole time. As Karina mentioned, the diversity and opportunity there's plenty of outpatient stuff that's non-surgical. There's opportunities for APPs to go as far as being first assist, the research opportunities, the networking opportunities. That was the big thing that I needed to find is who are my people? Because obviously as an APP, you're not necessarily a physician, you are a provider, but we are very unique. And so I really embraced having that network of people out there and the academia side of things. So the good, the bad, and the ugly about my 12 years in urology. So obviously the pros, it's fun stuff. I mean, you're going to learn all the different terms for every parts of anatomy that you never thought you would hear. I love my team. Again, like I said, they're all fun, lighthearted people. I, being in academia, thoroughly enjoy my educator role. I feel like to the residents, I used to be about their sister, but now I'm more like a really cool aunt. At least I like to think I am. And just collaborating with people on projects. And there's just so much potential for growth and scholarship and education. And then the organizations, again, I can't tell you how much that has allowed me to grow professionally, and my confidence in urology is being involved. The cons for me may be a little different than Karina, and this may be based on where you work, but there's a lot of role confusion. I get a lot of, well, you're just a PA, or what's the difference between you and a PA, and what does an MP do, and what does a PA do? And so that can be really challenging to me. The recognition, sometimes, it may feel like you have to work a little harder to get recognized, but in the end, with a supportive team and a network, that is a hurdle that's easily managed. As far as advancement, in the private sector, it may be a little easier, but in the academic system, particularly in my region, an APP isn't, I wouldn't say taken as seriously as a physician, but obviously I'm not a surgeon, and urology is considered a surgical field. So that had been a little bit of a challenge for me. So my advice, believe in yourself and your worth. We are very valuable and can save the physicians that we work with, the surgeons, valuable time. I have found little ways that make me invaluable to them. I can do things that aren't as time consuming to them. I can do prior authorizations. I can do peer-to-peers for them. I can be an asset that they have no idea. So know your worth and know what you can do for them. Remember, advertise yourself. Get involved with the early, mid, and late careers like we're doing with this webinar. Get out there and meet these people and pick their brains, because that is how I have advanced and gotten to where I am right now. Do not limit it to just APVs. You need to educate the nurses you work with, the medical assistants you work with, and even this staff. You're only as good as your team that you surround yourself with. So I take any opportunity I can. If I have read something interesting and digested it, it goes straight to my medical assistants and nurses and say, hey, this is a new catheter, and this is, XYZ, this is a new technique, because they're not maybe as privy to some of the information. And again, they're only as good as I am, and I'm only as good as they are. And so I try to build them up And by sharing that, I think it just creates that environment. Just be there, be available, be willing. Be willing to jump in there and do that gross, interesting procedure and just be present, and that will go a long way. But more importantly, have that balanced work life. Would I do it all over again? If I did, I would. And I would take my own advice. I think it took me several years to really get out there, out of my comfort zone, to start networking, to really expand my scholarship, to get myself more involved in the committees and, negotiating for myself and having my worth. I think that would be probably the biggest things that if I had to go back and do it again, that I would work a little harder on. But more importantly, enjoy the ride. So when I'm not slaving away at the clinic with all of my GU patients, me and my family like to travel all over the place in our van. This summer, we went to Canada and we went to a glacier. We went to Yellowstone and just had a blast. And so make sure you balance it all out so that you can keep your sanity. Thank you, guys.
Hey, everybody. I'm Lynn Allman. I'm coming to you this evening from rural southeastern Georgia. And I just want you to know that the three of us did not communicate with each other when we were doing our talks. And what I have found interesting for me is that how they're complementing each other and they're not necessarily overlapping. So I hope I'm going to do this justice also. So I have just recently retired from urology. Here's my background. I graduated in 1985, and I'm not sure the two ladies who just spoke were born yet, but that's where I was a graduate. I'm originally from Ohio, and I spent my early years in the ICUs, which I absolutely loved. I'm a go-getter. I'm a type A, so I went back to school. And at the time, the clinical nurse specialist was the thing to be. So I got that degree and made the move from Ohio to Georgia when I could not find the career that I wanted, because after I got that degree, they started phasing them out. So I moved south and found a job that I enjoyed, and thankfully found a husband that I needed. And as I suspected, the nurse practitioner or the nurse specialist positions went by the wayside, and I headed back to school. So when you have a master's degree in nursing, you don't get a second master's degree in nursing, you get a certificate, which only took me 8 classes, which was great. However, when I graduated from my NP program, I could not find a job. I know that sounds crazy, but I had just adopted a child and did not want full-time work, and went into the one area I did not want to go into, which was women's health. But interestingly enough, I ended up being involved in the clinical trials for the HPV vaccine. So I spent a lot of my time in women's health because A, I enjoyed it, and B, it worked for my family. And I did procedures and I did research. And then I made my move to urology. So while I haven't been in urology as long as 15 years, I'm now in my 24th year as a nurse practitioner. And that urology move was pretty easy, and it kind of just fell into my lap. Thankfully, I got to retire, which was fabulous. And I made my retirement on March 31st. And like most of us type A's do, I went back to work. And I'm now working in rural health, which I've never done, as a family nurse practitioner, which you can see I graduated in 1997 and have never done that. And so that's been an interesting transition. And I do work part-time faculty with the College of Nursing. So why did I get into urology? I got into urology because it was time for a change. 15 years in women's health, I really did love it. And every place I've ever worked, I've loved. But it was time for a change. and I really had maxed out my ability to grow and advance. It was a pretty easy transition for me. I guess I'm destined to work where your underpants are, because that's what we always say in women's health. But I ended up in the same area. And my department that I went to loved my gynecology background, because a lot of people don't want to see the women part of it. I don't know why, but especially in my practice. So it was easy for me and was a great transition. And everybody says it, and it's true. I worked in the medical ICUs. I worked in the surgical ICUs, and I like them both. So urology offers you that benefit. And I was doing procedures, so transitioning to urology was great because I could do procedures. So what are my other benefits? Why urology? Well, we all know there's a shortage of physicians, particularly in urology, which is why our patients wait weeks and months sometimes to get visits. And so that's why advanced practice providers are great. There's lots of opportunities in urology for teaching and mentoring, for research. There's committees, there's APP groups. The opportunities for you in urology are as limited as you make them. So for every place I've ever worked, it seems that I did not have mentors and I did not have peers. So I had to make my own path, and you just kind of get used to doing that. But in this area, once I kind of got things down, I had a ton of independence, which I've never had before, and ability to grow. So in essence, I was working as an independent provider, but I wasn't. Either way, it's been great. And ultimately, this has been one of my favorite periods. I've said that about several of my things, but I really have enjoyed this part of my career. And it could be that it's the end and I had the confidence and it didn't take me long to learn things, but I really enjoyed it. Challenges. This is the big one. I totally smile to hide how completely overwhelmed I am. That is what I'd like to say was one of my biggest challenges. Our practices are busy. I'm sure everybody's is. I know ours was very busy. And it was hard. And I keep asking people, is it harder because I'm older? Is it harder because I'm not as patient? Or is it just because it's a busy field? And it's probably all of the above. Other challenges, the patients, I saw the patients the providers don't want to see. I'm not saying that for any physician who may be on this call. I mean, no disrespect to anyone. We all know there's a hierarchy, and, there are patients that people don't want to see, or types of conditions people don't want to see. And that's who I saw. And I was okay with it. I just took it tongue in cheek and looked at it as a challenge. Another challenge that I struggled with was paperwork. I called it a homework folder, and I swear it was full every day. There's a lot of things that nursing staff can't do because a physician or an APP has to sign it or has to write a prescription or whatever. Phone messages, again, if you have great nursing staff who can take those messages, but some things a provider just needs to handle. And of course, prescription refills. The nurses can't do it. If you have residents, they might do it, but ultimately a lot of that falls on the advanced practice provider. Administrative time, I'll be chatting about that shortly. And then as a seasoned staff member, and everybody knew my name, everybody knew my number, and everybody knew how to find me. And so therefore, because she knew it, she could handle it, no matter if she was already overwhelmed. Those were my challenges. And that's just me personally. So my advice, in hindsight's 2020. And in my career, I'm now in my 39th year of healthcare. I have a lot of hindsight. So for me, I'm a learner. I love to learn. Expand your knowledge base. Grow it as much as you can. And the opportunities are limitless with the AUA and the SUNAs and the journal articles and everything else that's out there. So just learn. And I will tell you, going to family practice, woo, I'm on a straight up path right now. Find an area that's a need or one that people don't want to deal with. I mean, as much as I hate to say it, I did all the women's stuff. And that I was actually fine with it because I knew what I was doing. So I was very comfortable. And then I had to learn a lot about the painful bladders because nobody wanted to do them. And I was like, well, I'll just take it. Let me just make it my little pet peeve. And so now when residents graduate, because I have all these files and articles, they call me all the time and want to know, tell me about this or tell me about that, because they just don't have the base, because I spent a lot of time with those patients. So find your niche, learn procedures and perform them. I love procedures. I would have done 1,000 procedures. The only reason I didn't do procedures is because I was so busy, and I knew if I kept adding to my workload, it would be overwhelming. So for me personally, I did not learn as many as I would like to have, but I had to force myself to not do that because I knew if I continued to learn more procedures, I was just going to have to add on top of what I was already doing. But I think procedures are amazing and you can learn them and you can do them. I talked about making yourself super valuable. The reason that's great is I'm a troubleshooter. I write policies. I do training. I'm the go-to person. I did lecturing. That's great, but it can have its downfalls. So, and of course, I complain about it, but I do like it. So it's a double-edged sword, but make yourself really valuable. Be involved with your team. I was the first adult nurse practitioner in our program. And therefore I said, what do I need to do to become involved and learn from you? And they said, we want you to come to everything, which it was a residency training program. So I went in as like a resident. I attended all the meetings. Therefore I had a voice. So I was learning, but I was faculty and asked to be included. If you're not included, ask to do that. And another thing you can do for your team, since I'm getting ready, I was getting ready to retire, is I plan for the next new hire. I was involved in, setting up standards for that. I did not participate in the hiring process because I did not want to. I didn't think it was my place. But plan for your next hire and be involved. Administrative time or an administrative assistant. I'm going to again address this in a minute, but physicians typically have them, whether you're in private practice or in academia. So make sure you do too. You're a provider just like they are. What would I do different? The coulda, shoulda, woulda. And it's easy to say because I'm not there now. This is where I'm going to talk about admin time, administrative time. I was not given administrative time. I was just told to be in the clinic and work, which was fine because I love being in the clinic and working. But you need administrative time. You must, I don't want to say demand it. Please demand it. You need time to catch up. All my charting was done at home if I didn't have it finished. There are prescriptions that need to be refilled. I came in every morning an hour early to do stuff that I should have been given time to do that. That's a time to call patients. It's a time to review your labs and test results. It's a time to breathe, complete, medical records, review things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if I could tell anybody, new, middle, older, whatever, make sure you get administrative time. It is important. I would have done more procedures. I really wanted to, like I said, but I did urodynamics, penile injections. I did some fluoroscopic procedures, but I did not do the cystos. I know I could have done them. I would have enjoyed doing them, but I refused to take on more. So much is dependent also on your institution, your providers, and your state regulations. I work in Georgia, which is the most restrictive state in the United States. And so there's a lot of hoops we have to jump through to make things happen. So, if you have the opportunity to do them, do them. So saying goodbye, I worked at my institution for 30 years and I worked in I think I was in every department but labor and delivery. And so I was there a long time and I had a lot of things to tie up before I left my career. So before you go, especially if you're a seasoned, person in your department, give ample notice. They knew a year and a half before I left because obviously I was retiring and I had a lot of time to figure things out. Tie up all your loose ends. I think I tied up loose ends for a year before I checked and double checked and triple checked. I did actually get another NP before I retired. I trained her as a student, and then she came and worked with me for just over a year and a half. So she was in a good spot to take over. And then the other thing is share. I had files and files of, I developed a pre-op instructions. I developed, some information for getting cardiac clearance, a letter. All of these things that I developed thinking, boy, this would be nice to have, or a supply list or whatever. And I kept it in a file and I transferred all of my files over. And, that's a lot of work. And sometimes you're like, man, I worked hard. I don't want to share, but, share the wealth, pass it on. Pass on your secrets, pass on your knowledge. And while you're young and in your middle career, start you a folder. And anytime you're like, man, I wish we knew how to get someone IV antibiotics outside of the home, write it down as a protocol. Just do it. Bop, 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 bop. And then if you ever have to go back in there and change it, you just go back in there and change it or add to it or whatever. So I did a ton of those things. And you think they're going to call you. They're going to call you and ask you all kinds of questions when you leave. I didn't get any phone calls. So either I did a really good job, which I hope that's what it was. They say they miss me, but, make things as good as you can for your transition. And then, of course, they have my email and phone number, which they don't use. So don't wait too long. I've never heard one person tell me they retired too soon. Retirement, you have to be prepared for it. And I was leaving a career that I loved and a place that I loved, but you moved on to the next great thing. And I'm still transitioning. It's been March, but life is short and the weather's cooling down in the South, and I'm finally getting outside and doing some things. So don't wait too long. If you feel like you need to go. I waited about 6 months too long. So at the last couple of months, I was a little cranky and I hated it. I hated it for them. I hated it for me. But you'll know when it's time to either transition from one career, even if you're in urology and you move on, you'll know when it's time, and heed your warnings. Okay. Because life is short. So this is my current life. I retired to a farm that my husband's grandparents owned in the 40s. And I grew up on a farm in Ohio, and I walk the dogs and I check the baby cows and I get the eggs, and it's fabulous. And my new career is interesting. We'll just put it at that. Loved urology. Good luck to all of you. I hope you've enjoyed this program. And let's see what kind of questions y'all have out there.
Okay. So there's a couple of questions coming in. The first one is, how do you increase your scope of practice?
Go ahead, Karina.
I feel like one way to increase scope of practice is being a part of your state's leading organization for MPs, and from a policy aspect and speaking and speaking to and referencing NPP scope of practice, I feel like that's one way. I am from Kentucky, so I remember whenever I was in Kentucky as an NP student, that's some of the work I did. Now being in Minnesota, kind of learning, Minnesota is a full practice authority state, but I definitely am learning a little bit more. But I guess diving into opening up scope of practice, my department is pretty open as far as different Medicaid, like prescriptions and procedures.
Yeah, I'll address this too. I sat on our credentials committee for the hospital I worked at, and it doesn't matter, where you work. Every state has different set of requirements, but if you have an interest in it, let your team know. Learn about it, ask a lot of questions, view it, tell them you want to do it, and then start. I mean, I saw somebody say they had laminated. I had a binder with so much stuff in it, from everything from my license to my CPR card to every procedure to logs to everything. So if you're doing procedures, log them, because our state requires that you provide a log that demonstrates that you could do them under supervision and or independent. So anything you can do like that is really beneficial for getting those credentials.
I think I'll just add to what Karina and Lynn have already mentioned. For me, working at an academic facility, you would be in competition with those who are there training to be future urologists. So I never really dove into that area because I don't want to hinder them from learning. Like Lynn said, there's many times I helped a resident find the urethra instead of putting the scope in the vagina. So I know I can do them. I just don't want to take away from their training. But again, it would be based on like your state restrictions and the facility that you're working at.
Okay. The next question is from Jordan Hart. What is the best / most productive way for a PA or NP, I guess, to be integrated into a urology practice? And how was your schedule initially set up, I guess, when you started?
I can speak to that a little bit. One thing I really appreciate within my department is they utilize our role in various ways. So we have calendars where we work with physicians. I will say every day is a different day for me. Either I'm on my own or I may be working with a surgeon. But not only that, but we have set calendars where half the day or full day we could be doing procedures ranging from cystos, and I also perform like transperineal prostate biopsies. So I feel like within the various outpatient, because most of us mainly outpatient aspects in the procedure around, they utilize us for that. And in regard to like residents or the surgeons, they're doing more of like the surgical OR tasks.
I think from my standpoint, when I was around Karina's milestone, I was new to the provider role. And so they were very patient with me as I got comfortable. And then again, like Lynn mentioned, I'm the only female provider. So if anybody says they want a female, it's delegated to me. And that's perfectly fine. I'm actually glad that I'm there to be that female provider. But my schedule really kind of ended up being mostly women, recurrent UTIs, a little bit of interstitial cystitis thrown in there, some hematuria, obviously neurogenic bladder, because that's kind of my forte there. But as far as the schedule building, you really need to know what you can handle. And like Lynn said, you sit down with your medical director or whoever is the lead where you're at and make sure you say, I can handle this now. And as you can add to your, volume or, scope of practice of procedures or even new diagnoses you feel comfortable with, then you kind of grow that. But again, like Lynn said, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Please get your protected administrative time because they will run you to the ground if you do not advocate for yourself, because you do get those things done for them. It's actually, I take it as a compliment that they keep giving you more, but make sure that is added into your scheduling.
Are there any procedures you would not recommend due to the scope of practice and high liability?
For me, no, I don't think so.
I don't think I'd want to do prostate biopsies myself.
I feel like what's important is just having mentorship. I have the mentorship whenever I started prostate biopsies. I started with ultrasounds and then transitioned to working with an APP and a urologist where I worked a little bit in the OR and outpatient. I think it's more the transition of, and do you have that support from that team to pursue and be confident in doing that procedure? Because I will tell you, I love doing prostate biopsies and I'm confident in it and I love speaking to from it. So it's more just having, do you have that support in your department and the team that can make you feel confident, whether it's APP or urologist, because I have support from both sides and I know I'm lucky for that.
I think in knowing your own limits and making sure that even if they think you're competent enough, are you confident enough in your own competency would be with any procedure, I would think.
Any advice on how you learn to read imaging?
Practice.
Yeah. And I used to call my radiology department and ask them to show me things. I mean, they're more than willing. And then, it's a little harder in private practice, but, all you have to do is pick up the phone and call people there. And most of the time, they're more than willing to help you. But yes, it is look over and over, repeat it, repeat.
Look over with the physician if they're looking at it, or a seasoned resident or another provider, and say, hey, can you just whatever you're looking at, say it out loud, what you're thinking, and point the obvious out to me, and over and over and over. And then it becomes like second nature.
Mm-hmm. When you're a part of organizations like AUA and SONA, you can just look through their webinars that they have saved from
absolutely
like a few years ago, and you can reference that. And one thing I used during COVID was if you Google COVID didactic series urology, during that time residents were not able to kind of be incorporated within the I guess the educational role. So there were a lot of great videos from different institutes around the nation, and a lot of those, that's where I kind of learned more of my MRI imaging and some renal mass imaging. That was very beneficial because I'm more of a learner through video.
Monica asks, do APPs hold non-clinical roles at your institutions?
I guess it depends on what you're asking about. I mean, I felt like I did a lot of things that I didn't need to do or shouldn't have to do.
Not formal.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, technically, what you want to do is work at top of license. Always, always, always. But again, someone has to do certain things. And unfortunately, it's going to land on an APP other than a physician for the most part. That's just my experience. That's not across the board. But I would say I didn't have a lot, but there were just a couple little things. And if that's what's happening, or if you're not working at top of license, you have to make sure you have data. Everything's about bringing data to the table. And if you're like, I'm doing this and this and this, but if I was doing this and this and this, I would bring in this many more dollars. When they see that, boom, you're going to be transitioned.
And like I mentioned in my PowerPoint, you're only as good as your team are. Some of my medical assistants can run circles around nurses, and I would take them any day of the week. And that's because I invested in them. And that's not part of my job to be their educator. It's not part of my job to be their manager, but I step up and I've created worksheets for them, cheat sheets for them, education things. I have lunch and learns with them, and it refreshes things for me, but it keeps them abreast to these things that I'm talking to patients about, and it just makes it easier. So that's not a technical, clinical part of my job, but like Lynn said, you just kind of extend your little feelers out there and do all kinds of multitasking.
Oh, this one is a good one. How do you recommend going about asking for a raise?
I actually did that. After I had enough years of experience, and and our institution was horrible with raises. But I did data again. I pulled data. I pulled, these are the things I do. Boom, 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 boom. Last year, I added this procedure that I added a PTNS. And I was like, I brought in 700 PTNS patients that you wouldn't have had before. Boop, boop, boop. You just have to bring, and when you bring numbers to them, I promise you, they better. And if they don't, then I would go up. But I just, you have to be well prepared. If you are well prepared, you will go far.
Yeah, absolutely. You just have to tell them, they may not notice all of those little things that add up, the day-to-days that make their life easier. It just happens one day. So you need to keep account of all of those things you've done. I've made all of these folders for patient handouts. I do all of these peer-to-peers, even the non-RVU, income-driven things. I'm saving you X amount of time. But like Lynn said, you justify why they need to keep you, and they should try to keep you happy. And if that involves getting you to market value for what you're worth, then they should take you serious.
Mm-hmm.
Karina, this one's for you. Are there any certifications that you would consider working towards to advance your career as a nurse practitioner in urology?
A certification I'm aware of, but I currently do not have, would be through SUNA. There is a certification for nurse practitioners. That's the one I'm aware of at this time. However, after my fellowship, I guess more within Mayo Clinic Institute, I received a completion certification for my fellowship. And that's something I feel like has been enough for me at this time. And if I were to pursue any further certification, probably be within like the business or management aspect of me exploring something within a little bit something different. So certification, not a have to, definitely a great opportunity to dive in within various subspecialties of urology, and learning and testing yourself.
And I just wanted to add that I'm the only one that does not have a doctorate. When I told y'all I was old. When I went to school, there was not a doctorate. There was only a PhD program, and I was not getting a PhD. So people have asked me repeatedly why I don't go back. And trust me, I would love to have DNP behind my name, but I'm just not going to do it. I've already proven my worth, and I mean, I would love to have those letters, but I just opted not to do that. I mean, it wasn't available, so I haven't pursued it.
I did complete the certified urologic nurse practitioner certification last year. I felt uneasy about it, even with 12 years experience, but found that studying for it was really helpful. And then, it gives you more letters, but not just like certifications in that regard. There's other things you can get certified to do. So like Xiaflex, you can learn to do that and get certified. I did the Axonics course for sacral neuromodulation. So there's other like little certifications that you can do that will help you along the way that don't just have to be adding letters behind your name.
Thank you. I think this question from Emily goes back to the question about asking for an increase in salary. And she's asking, where do you find the data on the amount earned per patient or procedure? And does this differ based on private vit pay versus Medicare insurance? How do you ask billers for that information?
So when I did it, again, I worked in academics, so I had a lot of other things that I could add in there, like teaching residents and students and all that. But when it came to the dollars and cents, DRGs dictate what the Medicare rate is, and most insurances and companies go based on the Medicare rate. So you can always use that as a standard. But what you have to show is, if you were paying me this last year or 2 years ago, because, it went years before I got any raises. I'm making this now. And then this is, like I said, you have to find something that you contributed to, or before I was seeing no patients and now I have my own independent clinic. I was working with a provider. So you just have to tally those numbers you can use dollars, but sometimes just having, raw data in terms of the numbers of patients or whatever, because they can figure that stuff out, the billers and your people who manage that. But it's really not as difficult as you think, but just keep good records.
This question is from Rachel. She's asking, do you ever use behavioral therapy? And how do you feel about it?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I think one person, as far as a collaborative approach that I work with, is pelvic floor physical therapy too, and some behavioral approaches. And that's just from that collaborative approach because I've shadowed them before and learned from them. And also, hopefully they maybe learn a little bit stuff from me too. So yes, and being open to learning different types of behavioral approaches too. Definitely big on that too.
Yeah, I think a lot of times on the medicine side of things, being from the nursing background, we're all about health promotion and prevention. And I feel like the educational, the behavioral, conservative things fall more in my wheelhouse anyway, just because I'm not going to be the one performing surgery. Do I think you could potentially benefit from, sacral neuromodulation or Botox or something like that? Then yes, absolutely. But digging into the conservative behavioral stuff I've treated many patients who get so much better and haven't had to take a medication with side effects and do really well with the behavioral therapy.
Does anyone have preferred resources for pediatric urology?
I think Karina put something out there. Is there a Puna pediatric urology? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Any other resources you would recommend? Is that an organization, or is that do they have a website?
Yeah, I'm sure Puna, I have not been to their conference, but they have a lot of resources. And I think last time I visited their website, I was shadowing a pediatric urology team, and they have some free resources too. And I've heard they have a good conference.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. We've got about 2 more minutes. So would you recommend doing a fellowship right out of school, or kind of going straight into practice? Like, what are the pros and cons?
Yes, I have enjoyed being a fellow. And I will say in assisting with those that are coming on board, we have some new APPs. The variants of kind of that loading on of a new APP, learn this, here you go, you're learning kind of everything, and then you're ready to go, and you'll also learn on the job versus having that time with others. And it's not about you pushing out patients, but just learning the various subspecialties. It's been very helpful, and I can kind of see the difference from someone who's trained as far as just the initial years, just knowing the resources, especially if they stay within our department. It's a little bit easier transition of just kind of knowing the guideline approach, but definitely not a have to, because we have some great APPs. I didn't pursue a fellowship, but it was helpful for me because I know that's something that I wanted to pursue.
I think it would have been really helpful. I think at the time I got into practice, it wasn't a thing, but also, the availability, like I would have to travel all the way across the country. So the opportunity wasn't there, but I think it would be beneficial if it was available.
Thanks, guys. Well, it is 8:00 sharp. And so we are going to sum up our Advancing Your Career Strategies and Best Practices for APPs Working in Urology panelist discussion. We hope you guys had a great evening, and thanks for listening.